Before we start, I want to say that I do consume edibles. Personally, I like indica. It makes me relax. But I wanted to check out Dorian's experience with marijuana. Let's hear it.
I've been sober from smoking weed for over 6 months now. And this is the longest I think I've ever gone without smoking weed since I was like 15.
And you know what's crazy? I never got into weed when I was a teenager. My uncle offered me a hit when I was like, what, 17 years old, and I turned it down. I never got into weed until literally last year. I'm 26 now.
There's been other times in the past when I stopped smoking weed for a while because I was trying to get a new job and things like that. And there was a couple other times in the past when I was trying to just get sober for my health and my mental health. But this is
Okay.
definitely the longest
This is interesting to hear because for me personally, being high on edibles, I feel helps my mental health.
I've ever
This
gone
is
being
personal, by the
completely
way.
sober.
It
And
affects
since
people
weed
differently.
was my drug of choice, and it's also the drug that I've done for the longest time, kind of wanted to talk about what I've noticed after being sober from smoking weed for over 6 months. I
Okay.
do want to say that it was very hard. Every month felt like it got easier. The first couple weeks were terrible, but then a month passed and I felt better and things were still a little rough, but after like 2 or 3 months, I finally kind of got over it.
So, what do you mean? Like, what are your side effects from not having weed for so long? Because, like I said, I've only recently started my journey into marijuana, and I only did it personally for like my training, right? So, I'm in the martial arts. I know Dorian's in the martial arts. He has a whole video about him training like Batman. I used it, and I think it did calm my nerves if I took indica, but taking sativa, if anything, it made me a chatterbox and it made my neurons fire even more, right? And that's what it's supposed to do. Remember, guys, there's different strains of marijuana and they do different things to you. So before you even try it, make sure you study it. Okay. I know some people don't care. They're just like, oh, let me just smoke it. But it is detrimental if you misuse it.
I also really wanted to quit this time. There was a lot of this being a personal choice, and I think that made it easier, but it was still super difficult to do. And now that it's been over 6 months, I gotta say that I feel great. I feel like I can't believe it was that hard at first. I'd be lying if I said I completely don't think about it and I live in a legal state. So whenever I drive past a dispensary or whenever I kind of smell that someone is smoking nearby, I think like, that sounds so good right now. But I know that I can't.
If I was gonna try and explain it, it's like going into another state of mind, and I don't mean like tripping balls and seeing aliens. It's like if I was to explain it in video game terms, real life while sober, it feels like sometimes it's just moving and you have no control over it. How many times have you thought like, okay, actually this is perfect. What did you do last week? If you said went to work, eat, sleep, congratulations. That doesn't really explain what you did last week. And if you actually have to think about what you did last week, that wasn't eating, sleeping, working, or having sex. What did you really do? You don't know. It kind of felt automated if you think about it, right? Because that's just our society. We wake up, brush our teeth, go to work. Whenever you take marijuana, or at least when I take marijuana, it honestly feels like my consciousness comes down into reality. Like, so I feel like my consciousness, I'm always thinking, right? Me personally, I'm always thinking about life or what's going on in the world or what's going on in my environment. Whenever I am high, especially if I'm high and I in the public, I'm observing more of other people's lives. And I can see people when I look at them and I see their face. I can see if they're happy or if they're in thought, right? And like you can notice more things about life around you because you are more focused on the present instead of thinking about what's going to happen like maybe 5 minutes from now. Like say you're like, "Oh, I need to go to Walmart so I can go get some toilet paper." And like, okay, that's your mission. You're going to go get toilet paper. But if you're high and you do that, instead of focusing on going straight to the aisle to get toilet paper and then leaving, or maybe getting some snacks and then leaving, you might just wander around and just say, "Oh, I wonder what's going on today." let's look around. It's like peering into other people's lives as if it was a storybook.
Because I know that I am unable to just be the person who smokes in the evenings or the person who smokes on the weekends, because I've been addicted to it for so long, and I have always been
Weed
the
is
person
an
that
addiction,
smokes
by the way.
24/7. I'm finally starting to understand when addicts say like they just can't do it, and I finally have realized that I am like that, and I know that I just can't do it here and there. I've come to grips with that, and I'm glad that I have, because it's helped me a lot through this process. Before, whenever I would go back to smoking weed, it would always be that I thought like, oh, one hit's not gonna hurt. I'll just buy one pre-roll, or I'll just buy a gram and I'll be okay for
So
this weekend.
this is the interesting thing. I've actually never smoked weed. I personally don't think about smoking anything, whether it's weed or cigarettes. I just know it's detrimental to my health, right? Because I'm a health nut, believe it or not. I know I be eating pizza late, but I also like working out. So whenever I'm consuming cannabis, it is through edibles. Edibles take longer to kick in and they take longer to wear off versus hitting a joint. I'm guessing you stay high for like 30 minutes, an hour, maybe 2 hours. If you take an edible, prepare to be tripping that whole night and then waking up and you still might be a little bit high.
And that's all I need, and I'll be good. I won't keep smoking, which is, it's not true. It never has been. But I wanted to make this video more about like how I feel. So I don't want to get too into like my own personal struggles with it. I want to talk about the improvements that I've seen in my life and in my mental health and just in my physical health and all that, because I know there's people out there who probably smoked as much weed as I have or did, or probably more than I have and did, and are probably thinking about like what it would be like after they're sober for a while and what are some of the benefits. And this is just my personal take. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just some dude who smoked a lot of weed and want to talk about.
I'm a dude that didn't do weed at all until last year. So like it's like a different role, right? If you do smoke weed at a young age, it does, change your neurons and change the way you think. Versus my brain is already developed, because your brain supposedly stops developing at 25. Of course, you can expand on that, but your brain normally stops developing at 25. I'm 26 when I started. So I'm already tweaking it a little bit while for doing marijuana. Because of marijuana, my brain is tweaking a bit, or it has been tweaked. But I rather it have already been created and then tweaked versus it always being tweaked while it's developing at the same time. Because for all we know, the Dorian we're looking at is not the Dorian we could have met if he never did weed.
Being sober for a little while now. So one of the big things I've noticed, I want to say, is like my mental health. I have always felt that I've struggled with anxiety and depression to some degree. Definitely, I've had highs and lows when it comes to that stuff. I've always felt that I've had a problem with that. It's easier to talk about now because I'm coming to the realization that it's something that is just part of my life and something that I have to deal with. But I want to say that for most of my life, I think that I was self-medicating to help myself with the trauma. And I had a lot of anxiety and depression because of that trauma, but also because of the self-medicating with weed and alcohol. After being sober for a while, I'm noticing that my anxiety and depression was definitely elevated by smoking weed every day. It wasn't reduced, although I used to think that it was helping me with those things, and I convinced myself that it was helping me with those things. And I would see the studies where people were saying like, oh, there's new studies saying that weed does help with that stuff. The truth is there's also studies that show that weed amplifies that. And after being sober for 6 months now, giving up weed for the last 6 months, I gotta say that I realize how much better my depression and anxiety is, and how much worse I was making it with smoking every single day.
Okay, so this is very interesting. So I also have anxiety, and I've been diagnosed with a whole bunch of stuff due to the military. Of course, military just gives you a whole bunch of pills. You take the pills and you feel normal, right? I've been off of my medication before. I know how that felt. Was not a great experience, and you don't really realize it because you're not on the medication. When I got back on the medication, I could tell that I was becoming more functional. But at the same time, I felt like I was losing a part of myself, which technically you are because you're blocking it off by taking the medication. Now, my experience with marijuana while I was off my medication, it basically felt like I was myself on medication, but more. I was also my younger self that had past trauma that I eventually got over due to my use of marijuana, right? So I would have marijuana and I would sit and I would talk to a friend about my personal issues and then I'd cry about it. But after I would sober up, I would remember that whole time. And whenever you're when I'm sober, when I was so when I was depressed and I was sober, that's the best way I could put it. Of course, you bottle it up. If someone says, "Are you okay?" you say yes, right? Versus whenever I was high and someone's like, "Are you okay?" No. And let me break down and tell you why I'm not okay. Versus now, whenever someone's like, "Are you okay?" I just say never because in reality, I'm personally never okay. But in knowing that fact that I am never okay, I am okay with it. If I was to try and give an example, it's like when the Hulk, when Bruce Banner, they were like, "Oh, how come you're not angry?" And he was like, "I'm always angry." That's how he turns into the Hulk. That's the best way I could describe it.
If you're someone who smoked weed for the while, especially if it's like really high potency, you'll know that that first high of the day, or when you haven't smoked for a few hours and you take that big rip, or you just hit that vape a little too hard and you get that big wave of like anxiety, panic attack kind of feeling that weed brings on. I remember that feeling and I look back now and I think like, man, why was I doing that to myself? I feel like my heart was going to explode sometimes, and I don't feel that anymore. And I also don't feel the level of anxiety and depression that I was feeling. It's funny because many of us who end up having a problem with any substance usually are doing it because it's a form of self-medication and we convince ourselves that the thing is helping. And when you've done it for so long, you don't realize how much it's actually hurting you more. And I will say that that's like one of the things that I really noticed. I want to say a little bit about my physical health too. My preferred method of consuming cannabis was mostly through a vape. That was like the easiest way to do it. I do a lot of edibles too, but for the most part, it was mostly vaping because it was more discreet. I could do it all the time and I didn't want my kids smelling it. And I can like be sneaky about it with my wife when I would tell her that I wasn't smoking as much as I.
That's his personal life. I personally think, because like he's talking about his personal life. I'm not going to judge him on his personal life, what he does with whatever. But I would say, and I would advise, right? I'm not a doctor, by the way. I would advise, especially if it's legal, if you're going to do marijuana, like I said, study it. Study indica, study sativa. Which one do you feel better on and know what they do for you, right? I would also share this knowledge I would advise you to share this knowledge with your spouse and with your children because whether you like it or not, your kids are eventually going to find marijuana, whether it's in school or they find your stash, right? I'm talking to everybody right now. If you do not let people know what this thing can do, they're going to have to play a game of F around and find out. And with something like psychedelics, you don't want to do that at all.
It was easy to kind of hide it with edibles and vaping.
I don't know how you were hiding it with edibles, my guy, because when I take an edible after a second, I'll just start
was wrecking my lungs. I smoked for a really long time, and I'm a former cigarette smoker, and my preferred method of smoking weed was smoking weed. Okay. I like joints, I like blunts, and I like bongs. I gave up the blunts when I quit smoking cigarettes because I didn't want to consume any tobacco. Smoked plenty of joints, and I enjoyed hitting the pipe, and I enjoyed hitting my bong. And I did that for a really long time, and that was my preferred method of consuming for a while until, the last few years, especially after I had kids, it went into vaping. But my lungs have taken a lot of damage from smoking over the years. And I will say that I would wake up in the morning, and when I would take like that first deep breath of the day upon waking, I can feel like how much my lungs hurt. Like I felt pain in my lungs from just smoking and vaping too much over the years. And also, like, I trained jiu-jitsu. I used to love getting high before I go to jujitsu class, and rolling and being high. It's kind of part of the culture of jujitsu. Many of us that train also smoke weed, but
And I want to say that it's I want to say that it's helpful, at least for me personally. Whenever I do train Muay Thai, I would pop an edible, and then I go to the gym. And by the time I finish my warm ups and my stretching, it's starting to kick in. So while I'm in the gym training, your senses get amplified. So I can legitimately feel every strike. Boom. Right. I can feel it from my knuckle going up to my shoulder. I can feel the twist and rotation in my feet. I can feel all of that because it's amplified by marijuana. Is it a good thing to do? I don't know, because at the same time, whenever I was high, I wouldn't feel tired. So normally a session of Muay Thai or any martial arts, it's for me an hour. Even at the gym, normal gym, an hour, because there is such thing as overworking yourself. Whenever I am high, I don't get tired as easily. So this 1 hour session can accidentally go to 2 and maybe even 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours of straight cardio and intensive body movement, stretches and whatnot. That is not good for recovery. But at the same time, you don't feel that you're damaging yourself. So I would say be careful if you guys are going to do any drugs or any substances before doing any type of training.
but I didn't realize how much it was hurting my cardio and it was hurting my stamina because my lungs were just kind of damaged from smoking so much over the years and from vaping all day long. Like I was vaping weed all day long. And now I don't feel as winded anymore. I feel like I have way more endurance in my lungs. I feel like I can breathe easier. I don't wheeze anymore. I was at the point where I was wheezing when I was breathing. It feels like I'm starting to repair a lot of that damage that I've done. And it's crazy like how much in like a short amount of time, because 6 months isn't a long time, how much I can feel the difference now in my lungs. Also, like another part of my health was...
Well, it's interesting because you seem kind of fit, but every time I hear you, I don't know if it's just because your microphone quality is really good, but I can hear you inhale. I'm listening to your inhales.
How much I can feel the difference now in my lungs. Also,
it's like... you're not really saying a long sentence. You're not really doing run-on sentences. So if like for me to hear you like inhaling, like you are using your lungs, like, and you're just talking. So I don't know if that's really a damage or if that's just something we all do whenever we're just talking to the microphone. You guys let me know. Have you guys heard me inhale while making video? Or you guys probably don't even listen.
So like another part of my health was that I've got some crazy willpower and self-discipline when it comes to being able to like control what I eat when I smoke weed. And although I have done diets on weed where I eat super healthy and count my macros while I'm smoking every single day and I'm able to lose weight, I will say that when I am not focused on that and I was consuming marijuana on a regular basis, if I wasn't on a strict diet and I wasn't trying to be super good, I would take in so much extra shitty food all the time. And those midnight snacks and those sweet treats that I would...
And the midnight snack is a burger.
would have, or those savory delights that I would have, and how I would overeat and I would have the munchies, and how much that affected my weight and how much it affected like the stuff that I was putting into my body. I was borderline pre-diabetic a year ago, and I did a lot of big changes. I decided to make some big changes to my health. I tried keto for a while, and I did a lot of different things over this summer to improve my health. One of them being giving up weed, because when I gave it up was in July. I am starting to see like how much weed was impacting my health because of bad decisions I would make with food, lowered inhibitions, and how I would just overeat and eat stuff that wasn't good for me because I was stoned and was just hungry.
You know what? I feel like you can actually use that to an advantage, right? So people don't know, after you get high, you get this thing called the munchies where you want to eat. But when you eat things, it does taste a lot better. So like me personally, the way I kind of hacked it is I put a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables in my fridge. And it's like, Dang, okay, it's munchie time. What's in here? Some broccoli, some strawberries, bananas, apples. I eat it and it still tastes good. And it's like, I don't really have to worry about it because I am eating something healthy. But it is possible to overeat on something healthy as well.
Stoners love food. Giving up weed has made me have a different relationship with food, which is good because it's helped my health a lot. And that's another thing I've noticed being sober for the last 6 months. So I've always considered myself an introvert, but I'm starting to think that maybe my relationship with weed made me more of an introvert. I realize now, which is something that...
What strains were you taking, by the way?
That I didn't realize for a long time was that how much weed made me an introvert. When I was high, I would struggle with having make a phone call. I would struggle with having to talk to people.
This is so interesting because every time I'm high, I just start calling everyone. I'm just like, what do you do? I'll literally call people from 5 years ago that I ain't talked to. What are you up to? How's life? And I'm over here happy and they're just like, how you been? I'm like, man, I'm great.
Having to go and socialize with people when I was high was something I really didn't want to do. And I was a very functional stoner. You would have never guessed that I was high all the time because I was able to go to work. I was able to attend meetings. I was able to have conversations with people. But the desire to want to do any of that outside of being a responsibility like work and wanting to go out and meet new people or just socialize with people I already knew or talk to people that called me on the phone that were friends or even respond to text messages. It's crazy to think how much weed made me more introverted. I don't necessarily know why. I think it just has to do with when you're kind of stoned, you don't really want to talk to anyone. But then when you're always stoned, that just becomes part of your personality. And I always felt awkward in social situations because I was always just kind of high. I always was foggy. When you smoke weed all the time,
I know exactly what he's talking about too. It's like after doing sativa, I actually don't get this type of hangover feeling. But whenever I do indica and it's like I'm so relaxed, the next day I can feel that I can't really think all the way. So whenever I'm sober like I am now, I can basically talk and not really have to think about it. Sometimes it sounds good. Sometimes I'll stutter because sometimes I do have to think about what I say before I say it because sometimes things can get misconstrued. Whenever I have this brain fog because I was high before, while I'm high, I can still talk and everything's fine. But the next day I might be overthinking or I'm thinking too much or I'm not thinking enough. I'm like, wait, I'm trying to understand what's going on in daily VTuber clips, but I don't get it because I'm high. Or I'm hungover. It's like a fogginess. It's like, imagine you're thinking about your favorite movie, but you can't remember the words to it. It's your favorite movie for a reason, but you just can't remember the scenes.
Super stoner, unless it's Saturday night and you're purposely trying to get yourself like that. You become highly functional. You're at that level all the time. So it's not oh, that guy's definitely high. Sometimes I'm sure people were probably is he high? Because he's kind of acting a little funny, but I was just so good at being high all the time that it wasn't noticeable. But I do realize now after being sober how much hilarious. It made me just be weird socially. I don't know how much better to put it, but that being weird turned me into an introvert and it almost produced social anxiety that I don't think I would have had and I don't think was something that was natural for me. And it was mostly because I think of me just consuming cannabis all the time.
I don't know what his life is like, but for me being a foreigner living in a foreign country, right? I already have the expectations of being weird. So whenever I am high and I'm in the public, if I don't honestly have to worry about that type of social pressure due to the fact that anything I do is already considered not normal. And since it's not normal, it is normal, right? Because I'm an American living in Asia. It's okay, we don't really know what an American is like, especially a Black American. So if he's just walking around humming and singing music, that's probably what a lot of Black Americans do. And that's just their thought process. There's nothing wrong with that. And if anything, I'd be happy if people thought Black people were just chilling and listening, playing music and singing out yeah, why not? It's fun to sing in public. personally, I started doing it, and I'm just like, yeah, this is fun. Why not?
It kind of made me
It
that way.
turns
It's
heads,
just something I noticed. Something else too is that I used to spend a lot of money on weed. My weed budget a month was about $300 to $400, and it's just
Damn,
crazy to think that now because
that's
that is
crazy.
so much money. And if I
For
really think about
real.
like how long
You could have just grew some plants, my G.
I've been smoking and how much money I've spent on weed over the last 20 years because I've been smoking for
Don't do that, because then you could take that into account. How much money have we, the audience, spent on toilet paper all of our life? You know, we spent probably close to tens of thousands on just that basic necessity. Well, for some, not for me. I have a bidet, but yeah.
over 20 years. It's just crazy. I could probably have $100,000 in the bank right now
No,
with
you
compound
wouldn't.
interest and all that.
You
I
wouldn't.
don't
You wouldn't.
know
You
why I
would've
never
spent it
really
somewhere
thought
else.
about that. And I know that's something that like cigarette smokers will say like, oh, if you pay $6 to $8 a pack and you smoke 2 packs a day, how much is that over time? Well, I'll tell you like this, weed is way more expensive than nicotine, although I don't know, depends on where you're at, because
It does depend
here
on
in
where
the
you're
Pacific Northwest, weed is pretty cheap, but I still smoke top shelf weed. The flower I would consume, I made sure it like was pesticide free, and then I also like consumed the best oils and things like that for my vapes. I'm
Bro
sophisticated.
said
I'm a top shelf guy.
yeah.
I don't like the shitty weed that they have at some of these dispensaries, so I always bought like the good stuff. That's
premium.
a lot of money, but
It is.
over the years
You get
I would
what you
smoke
pay for.
anything I could. Because I'm in a state that's legal, I have the luxury of being able to pick top shelf weed. But because of that, I ended up really spending a lot of money on weed over the years, especially in the more recent years. And now I'm realizing like how much money I'm saving because of that. I feel kind of stupid because of how much money I've spent over the
Don't
years
worry
because
about
of
it.
weed. So that's definitely something else that I noticed in the last 6 months.
A lot of people think, if they cut back on something, like his example was like the cigarettes. If all the cigarette smokers stopped smoking cigarettes, they would put that money in somewhere else that probably wouldn't be as beneficial as they think it would be, right? So if it's not cigarettes, would it be alcohol? Maybe. Would it be video games? Maybe. Would it be another subscription service? Because there's a subscription service for everything nowadays. Maybe. Would it be for eating out? Maybe. Would it be for ordering food? Maybe. Right? I doubt. I would even love to bet money that 90% of people, if they stop their bad addiction, they would not put that money into something good. They would not they would not put it in the stock market. They wouldn't put it in a 401k. They wouldn't put it in anything like that. They would just spend it on something else that gives them pleasure slash joy, whether that be another bad thing like an alcohol, or it would be something like, I don't know, donation. They might just donate it. Not everybody's really gonna think, yeah, I'll have 100K in the bank account. That's not how that works.
On the high end, my weed budget was close to $400 a month. So if you think about that, in a year, that's almost $5,000.
That would have gone somewhere
on
else.
my weed budget. It's
Yeah.
nuts because now I'm kind of saving that money. So
Well, that's good.
nice.
You're saving.
I will say another thing
I
too
don't know
is
what you're
that
saying
kind of
before,
mentioned
though.
it throughout this video that I've always been like a highly functional stoner and I've always been able to get my shit done. Didn't realize how much harder weed made it for me to get stuff done. And I didn't realize how much of being in that permanent haze and that foggy high all
It's
the time
hard.
feeling
It's
was
hard.
impacting my productivity, was
it
impacting
does.
my desire to
It
want to
does.
do things and my ability to do some of those things. It was hard for me to focus a lot because I was just high all the time. And like when I was learning new things or trying to get things done, it felt like I would have to like read the same thing over and over because I couldn't process it because I was kind of, stoned.
Understandable.
And I noticed that there was a lot of things that I wanted to do or start doing that always felt like a little bit harder to do because of the fact that I was high all the time. Like it's so much easier to be motivated to go to the gym when you don't wake up and smoke a bowl the first thing in the morning. Kind of have more energy and you just have more mental clarity and focus. And it's a lot easier for you to want to set goals and be ambitious and do bigger things when you're not in that weed brain fog state.
Yeah, I would say like that also depends on what type of person you are, right? The haze is definitely something I think would limit everybody. But I'm not too sure if people would necessarily start doing things that they otherwise wouldn't. I think that is also determined on how ambitious you are as a person.
State all the time. And being able to be organized and be productive is something that has improved so much in the last 6 months, especially in the last like 3 months. I said like the first few months was really hard for me. I was just mad that I couldn't smoke or didn't want to smoke anymore. And it was hard for me to kind of get over the fact that I was giving it up. But when I started to not feel that way anymore and I started to kind of put that energy in other places, and then I started to get more organized and I started to get more ambitious. And it's weird because I always felt like I was highly motivated even when I was smoking all the time, but I realized like how much I was stunting my growth because of being high all the time, and how much more I can do because I wasn't high, and how much more I can focus, and how much more I wanted to do like different things, how much I almost wanted to be better, because weed does kind of bring down your ambition. It kind of makes you okay with like, whatever, I'll get to it later.
I think it's a compound of a lot of things. Maybe the haze on top of being stoned, right? So whenever I would do edibles, I'd get high for a day, and then I wouldn't do it for like the next 2, 3, 4 days, right? So I have a time to actually bring myself together. But if you're getting high, you have the haze, you get high while you have the haze. It's like a compound effect. So yeah, it would make sense that you would think this, but I think if you give yourself time to actually rest and process it, I think you could make a balance with it.
Who wants to work so hard? Let's just relax today. I do got to say that with all of that combined, the increased focus, desire to want to do more, and also feeling like the energy to want to do it because I'm not high all the time, a major improvement that I have noticed in the last 6 months. And it's definitely something worth mentioning because I didn't realize how much that was impacting me. And I always thought that I was a real like goal getter and high achiever for a stoner. And now I'm realizing like how much bigger my goals can be and how much more I think I can achieve now because I'm not high all the time, and I'm able to like process my thoughts better, and I'm able to focus longer, and I'm able to like want to get things done because I don't feel like I'll just
I'll do it later.
Get to it later. I'm ready to go every morning, where before I would always feel groggy, not really good when I wake up. Weed doesn't give you a hangover. One more thing that I can like segue into.
Well, like I've never done alcohol, so whenever I'm saying hangover, I'm talking about the haze. But I actually don't even know what a hangover feels like. So
if you actually do the studies and you research how weed impacts sleep, how it actually does in a way give you a hangover, and if you've smoked weed long enough, you probably have noticed it.
The haze.
If you smoke weed all the time and you don't take a break, you probably will never notice what you feel like without it. But I'll say that my sleep feels much better. I feel like I do great, and 8 hours of sleep is like all I need now, and I wake up and I feel great. Before, I was someone who slept a lot, and I was like a super deep sleeper, and everyone tells you, like weed helps you sleep, but if you actually look into it, weed is actually bad for your sleep, and the quality of sleep that you get when you're high or when you smoke weed all the time isn't actually good for you.
So I am also not too sure about this because I personally have sleep apnea, so I go to bed with a breathing machine, right? Part of my training and my test was actually get super high on indica because one thing that I feared was actually dying because I felt like I was going to overdose, right? So when I sleep with my breathing mask and like this is my test, I'm like, okay, let me just do this and go to sleep to actually see. And I think it was like one of the most immersive dreams I have ever had. And due to the fact I have a breathing machine, I'm 100% sure I was enjoying it. I'm pretty sure I was in REM sleep. I slept and I woke up in the same position. I felt super numb, super relaxed. It was like a numb it if I was to explain good quality sleep, I would have to say imagine you don't feel anything but relaxed wherever you're sleeping. So if you sleep on your side, your whole side that's on the bed is just relaxed. But technically it's numb because you've just been laying on your side the whole time. So whenever I sleep on my back, which is the best way to sleep, science says anyway, it's the best way to sleep. So sleep with the breathing mask. I'm on my back. I wake up. Sabai. Sabai is a Thai word. It means comfortable, something like that. So when I wake up, Sabai feels good, and I'm waking. I like slowly move your fingertips. Ooh, body's activating. All right, we feeling good. All right, let's get up. Boom, feeling good. That's just my personal experience. Like I said, I have a breathing machine. So I don't know if you guys are snoring normally and then you take an edible or whatever. I'm not too sure what will happen, and I don't know. Don't find out, I guess.
And that's something that I don't think many stoners realize, because you sleep so heavy and you sleep so long, but that's more than likely because the sleep you're getting is terrible. And I remember being someone who could sleep 10 hours a day, and I felt like I could sleep like forever.
10
I would
hours
always
a
wake up
day.
feeling groggy and tired. And I never feel like that now. After 6 months of not smoking weed, I feel great when I wake up. Being like a stoner who smoked all the time, I used to wake up and feel like crap. And then, of course, the first thing I would do is hit my vape pen. Like literally, like my eyes would open. I'd go take a leak and I'd grab my vape pen and then I'd hit it. Sometimes I'd grab the vape pen out of bed as I'm walking to take a leak, like first thing in the morning. So I was just always in that haze. I think from the research that I've done, don't quote me on any of this, the reason why the sleep isn't as good when you're high all the time is because it affects your REM sleep. And I think that's also why it impacts your dreams. I dream again, which is weird.
So REM sleep is like the final level of sleep. There's multiple levels of sleep. I learned this in the sleep apnea class, of course, right? So they teach you everything you need to know about sleep. So the best adequate sleep is whenever you enter REM. REM sleep is, it's the ability to dream and have the ability to remember those dreams as well. So some people, they don't remember their dreams. I'm not too sure if that's due to them not actually being able to remember their dreams, or they're not having good quality of sleep. So if you want to enter REM sleep, you will have to get good quality of sleep. To get good quality of sleep, don't go to sleep on a full stomach. Also, don't go to sleep on an empty stomach. Remember, I'm trying to teach you guys stuff that I learned from actual teachers. So I'm just trying to pass on the knowledge because that's how life works, right? They also said when you go to sleep, or wherever you go to sleep at, like, so say you go to bed, they said don't take naps during the day because taking naps will mess up your sleep pattern. So even if you're really, really tired, they say don't take a nap. I still take naps, but I have the luxury to do whatever I want. If you have like a job that requires overtime and working overnight, you're not going to be able to really get a good sleep pattern due to the fact that your schedule is always changing. Now, if your schedule is always the same, so you're always working night shift or something like that, it is still possible for you to get REM sleep during the day. Is it adequate? I'm not too sure. I'm not a doctor. I'm just passing on knowledge, baby.
Because if you could say like weed kills your dreams, it does not only literally but metaphorically. I guess it does kill your dreams, because part of me researching the sleep thing with weed also led to like weed being like a dream killer, and you don't dream when you smoke weed. And I think it's because you don't have good REM sleep and you're.
I want to say when I was high as hell and I went to sleep, bro, I had a whole dream. I was like, my body was moving. I was flying. I was talking to cherubs. It was great. I don't know about everybody else, though.
Your dreams usually happen in REM sleep. And if you don't have good REM sleep, that's actually when you get the most rest. And I think that's like how all of that stuff is connected. And I will say that like after 6 months of not smoking, I feel like my sleep is just so much better. And that groggy weed hangover, even though you don't have a headache and it doesn't feel like your body feels like shit like a drinking hangover does, anybody who smoked weed for a long enough time and takes a break will realize like how much of a weed hangover you actually had. I used to smoke so much I'd wake up still feeling high.
You know what's crazy? It literally only took me 2 months to notice this. It's like you guys do it too much. You guys gotta separate it. And I get it. Some people, they feel like they need to smoke every day. I'm telling you, if you could take a break, wait. Like if you've been doing it for years every day, definitely wait a couple months, right? and then maybe try again, right? That would be my advice. Remember, I'm not a doctor, but if you're going to try and balance it, because life is about balance, okay? Not everything good is bad, and not everything bad is good. Sometimes everything is a shade of gray. Okay, weed makes you feel good, but it can give you a hangover. Alcohol can make you feel good, but it can give you a hangover. If you drink every day, turn into a bad person 9 times out of 10. If you do weed every day, I feel like you suffer from your own issues more. I don't think you're a bad person if you do weed every day. And in fact, some people tend to be nicer when they do weed every day. But being nicer doesn't equate to you being better. So do as you wish with this information.
It was like I was just like always high, and then getting rid of that and clearing that up has really been a big improvement. And I really notice now, after I haven't smoked for a while, like how much better I sleep and how much more rested I feel in the morning. I want to talk about like my personal life with my wife and my kids, and how much I didn't realize that weed and my addiction to marijuana was making me not be in the moment, I guess, and making me kind of like a distant parent and not as engaged with my children and not as engaged with my wife and not as attentive to like my surroundings and what was going on with them, and being in a conversation but not paying attention because I'm kind of like, stoned and zonked out and like thinking about other stuff, not being present. It really was impacting my relationship with my family in that way. Also, it was affecting my temper and my mood as well. Like I said, I was high all the time, but when I would go 20, 30 minutes without hitting my vape for whatever reason, we were out and about and doing something, I can tell when I would come down from my high, if I wasn't just constantly keeping myself at the perfect level that I like to be at, the minute that I wasn't there, I would start being moody. I would start being kind of a dick. I would start withdrawing, I'm guessing, is what would happen, right?
Not withdrawals, brother.
My relationships with my family, my kids, and my wife. And I realize that now, and it makes me feel like...
And that's good that you realize it now, because at least now you can correct the issue, and now you can preferably have a better life with your family.
Such a shitty parent for ever thinking that being a stoner dad or being a stoner husband was a good thing. And I've given up alcohol also, so I know that wasn't helping either, but I smoked way more weed than I drank, and drinking was more of a weekend thing that would kind of creep into the weekdays occasionally, but I wasn't like drinking every day first thing in the morning, but I did smoke weed like that. And I realize now, after being sober, how much better of a parent I am, and how much better of a husband I am, and how much better of just a person I am when I'm not high all the time.
So I would ask this, because we all feel like we know what's best for us, or we know how we think we feel and stuff like that. Dorian, I would ask you, you don't have to tell us, right? Because it's your personal life, right? I would ask you personally, ask your wife, has she noticed any pattern of behavior changed in you, And if so, is it positive, right? I don't know if your wife watches your videos or anything like that, but you should also ask them. Ask your friends, ask your coworkers, hey, you guys notice anything different? I changed something in the last 6 months. Like, they don't need to know you were smoking weed, obviously, but just ask them, have they noticed anything? That, I think, shows more of a clear picture on how your character is developed. The way people perceive you is, unfortunately, the reality we live in. So what I mean by that, if people think you're cool, then you are cool, even if you don't think you are. If you think you're cool and people don't think you're cool, then inadvertently you are not cool, because society deems it so, and perception is reality, unfortunately.
And how much better my patience is with my children, and how much more
you need to be
I'm
patient
engaged with my family when we're together, and how much more I'm in the moment and paying attention to everyone around me, I didn't realize like how selfish weed was making me. And even though there were some times when I would get so high that I would have these epiphanies and think like, oh, I'm going to do this better and I'm going to be a better person. And I'm going to stop smoking weed. I don't know if I'm the only one. I can't be the only one. I know I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one. But if you've ever smoked weed like I did for as long as I have, you'll know that you probably went through a lot of times where you were questioning whether or not you were okay, in the sense of like, why do I do this? And I know personally I've gotten so high sometimes where I kind of have these reflections of self and these moments of clarity, even though I was super stoned, where I realized like what I'm doing is not good and the way I'm living is not good. And the way that I am being to the people around me wasn't good.
But you changed it. So does that mean it worked? Right? Because you say yourself, you were a bad person whenever you were high. You haven't been high for 6 months and now you're a good person. You also said you questioned yourself and you thought about it. And now you're saying after 6 months, you think you're a better husband, you think you're a better dad, and you don't do weed. But was weed telling you to stop doing weed? Because if it was, it's true. Maybe it was right. I've questioned it too. I've had my own. I already talked about how I cried earlier, right? That's part of it. I yell at myself when I was high. My younger self would yell at me. I would yell at my younger self because you can't change the past, right? That's part of it. And I think that's why I would also advise people, if you were to consider doing marijuana, do it with a friend that is sober, right? Especially someone close to you that won't judge you, because your inner demons might just come out. But confronting them, that's how you grow as a human being.
But then the next day I would go and get high again. And so many times I wanted to quit smoking weed when I was high. And it was almost like weed was telling me like, dude, you don't need this anymore. And I wish I would have listened to that. And I realize now how much better off I am without it. And if you're someone who's really thinking about quitting, I know that so many stoners cope, and I know that there's a lot of people that believe that weed is therapeutic, and I know that a lot of people consider it medicine. And I was one of those people for a really long time. And while
I wouldn't say weed is a medicine, I would say it is a strong and effective coping mechanism, right? So people say, oh, they cope with the pain by drinking alcohol. I personally haven't seen anybody have a positive effect from constantly drinking alcohol. But I've personally had a positive effect from doing marijuana, and I was straight edge my entire life up until last year, because I'm over here living a great life, but I'm depressed. Why am I depressed? Because I neglected my past issues for so long and thinking success is what would make me happy. I was successful last month. I was successful last year. I was successful 2 years ago, and I'm successful today. But the difference is, when I started taking marijuana, I realized why I'm successful. And I understand that my success wasn't because I'm so great. It's because I didn't want to be what I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be a failure. I didn't want to be a loser to myself. So I said, I will do whatever it takes for me to get this. And when I got it, I didn't feel any good about it. There was no pride in getting the play button. There was no pride. Like, yeah, it felt good in the moment to get that stuff. It felt good in the moment to have the money and the girls come over and they'll get the fast motorcycle, right? It was good in the moment. But in the grand scheme of things, it didn't make me feel good until I tried marijuana and I let out my issues to myself in front of my friends. I've done it. I've cried in front of multiple people. Actually, I've cried on the internet, for God's sakes, right? Life is not straightforward and it's not easy. I'm talking to all the young people that are watching. You're going to go through life. You're going to get bumps. You're going to get bruises. And nobody's going to be there to really lick those wounds. You need to be able to accept that you're going to have demons, you're going to have skeletons, you're going to have issues. And you need to know that we all have that. And marijuana, at least for me, help me reconcile with my demons and my skeletons. I am one with myself because I talk to myself, right? Does it make you seem crazy? Yeah. But how come this isn't crazy? Me talking to a camera is not considered crazy. I remember back in the day, people had to pretend that they weren't doing YouTube. They had to whisper when they were doing a video or whatever, like, hey guys, I'm making a video. I got to be quiet. My parents are home, right? Now, everybody wants to be a Twitch streamer. Everybody wants to do YouTube, or at least that's what the census say the children want to be. That's what they want to do. Life is tricky. And sometimes you're going to have to think outside the box if you're going to get ahead. For me, marijuana helped me realize that. For Dorian, I think he overdid it and the weed was telling him you don't need it anymore. But since he was so used to doing it, he kept doing it, right? At least that's what I'm getting from this 20-minute video. Never met the guy, never talked to him in my life. But it seems like him being sober is good for him. But Dorian, now I'm talking to you. Will it be good whenever you eventually get to that point where you're like, damn, maybe I should get high? Because even when I'm sober, sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe I do need to talk to myself again. Or maybe, hey, I need to pull out this other part of me, right? The youth, right? I'm 26. I'm not old, but I am reminded that I am aging every day just by looking in my surroundings. When I see my friends get married, when I see my friends have kids. And I remember I used to watch YouTube videos and people talking about the same thing. Oh man, people that I know are having kids and blah, blah, blah. And of course, me as a youth, I'm like, yeah, that's life. But you don't really realize it till it happens to you. Till it's you and your friends and you're looking around. You don't have, well, I don't have kids, right? But some of my closest friends have kids and they're having even more kids, right? And now I'm Uncle Sean, right? Legitimately. And it's like, what? It's crazy, right? I like this video. This is a good video, man. That's all I gotta say, really. This is a good video. This is good. This is something you could really think about and meditate on, honestly.
Or that there are some medical properties to marijuana, and while I know that there's more research being done, if you're finding yourself self-medicating, if you're finding yourself smoking weed every single day, if you're finding that you feel like you have a problem and you have a bad attachment to cannabis and you feel like it's controlling your life and you want to stop, try. Because if you're starting to feel that way, then you more than likely do have a problem. And you're probably in a very similar situation to the one that I was in.
So I was going to say, literally, he's talking to himself via us, right? He's literally preaching his experience because people don't really say stuff that's not really, it's not really congruent to them. So everything he's saying, if you feel like this is not good, this is how he felt when he was constantly high. He is inadvertently letting you know his experience, and he also tells you because he said similar, but that's probably exactly how he felt.
And
not too sure.
It took me many years to realize how bad it was for me. And while so many people will argue and say that it's not that bad, I think that if you have an addiction to it, if you have an addiction to anything, food, video games, weed, alcohol, whatever.
Remember what I said earlier in the video, guys.
So often that it starts to feel like it becomes who you are and it's a huge part of your life that you feel like you can't live without, and you know in your gut that it's not good for you, you should try to take a break. Maybe you need to come to the realization, like I did, that you're an addict and you got to stop. While I love smoking weed.
And that's the hard part, to admit that you are addicted. Everybody thinks that it can't happen to them. They hear about the pornography addictions, the video game addictions, and that can't happen to me until you check your game time. And it's like, bro, you logged over 1,000 hours in World of Warcraft. Or, bro, look, the new Call of Duty just came out last week and you already max level. How are you max level already? Like the entire lobby can see you are max level. You have the master camo, right? You got all the kills with every single weapon. You got every camo unlocked, and this is your reward, the master camo, and you're showing it off. But the game only came out last month. You have an addiction to the game, whether you like it or not, whether you're doing it for content, whether you're doing it because you want to think you're the best at Call of Duty, right? Whether you think you're going to go pro or whatever, right? That is an addiction. Is it bad? It depends on your lifestyle. If you're a pro gamer and you get the master camo, well, is it bad? Yeah, but at the same time, it's your lifestyle. You're getting paid to get the master camo. And since we live in a society where society deems money is more valuable than our own time and our lifespan for some reason, then technically speaking, because remember what I said, perception is reality, you're doing a good job. Get that master camo, guys.
And I wish that I could do it every once in a while. I know that I can't because I've tried that before. Now being sober for as long as I have, for the first time ever, being sober this long, well, I'm starting to realize how bad my relationship was with a lot of the things that I was addicted to. Mm-hmm. And weed was probably one of my biggest addictions and one of the longest addictions that I've had. And now I'm starting to see it for what it was. And I'm glad that I am seeing it for what it was and realize that it wasn't helping me as much as I thought it did. And giving it up is honestly one of the best things that I think I've ever could have done. And I know personally I can never go back because it's just something that I can't control. With that said, I hope this video was helpful.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome to actually look at this video. And for me personally, every video I watch, especially when it's like this, like old school YouTube style, just talking to the camera, I love it because it gives me a chance to analyze someone else's lifestyle and directly compare it and contrast it with mine, right? People say never compare your life with someone else. I agree. Never compare it to the point that you're obsessing. Why isn't this me? Instead, you should look at it like, how could this be me? Or how could I be better, right? So you have to compare and contrast. What did they do? They did this, but inadvertently, this happened to them, right? Dorian, 200,000 subscribers. That's really good, right? He had to sacrifice his personal life. Yeah, he's talking about he's still addicted. He's relapsing. He's talking about he was addicted to marijuana he was addicted for 20 years, right? So inadvertently, he is helping other people, which is good. This video or his video got him money, which is good, but he's sacrificing his personal privacy. I'm doing the same thing, making this video. I have to explain my thoughts and opinions by giving my personal life, telling you about myself. That is something that I do because I am comparing and contrasting, because for me, it's entertaining. And for you, hopefully, it's informative because I do like to teach. I like it whenever I tell somebody something and I can literally see in their face and in their brain, boop, oh my goodness, I learned something new. So hopefully you guys did learn something new. Hopefully Dorian sees my video and hopefully you can reach out, brother. We could talk or something. I don't know. I like making friends on the internet. It's fun. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the next one. Comment, rate, subscribe. Bye.